You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, New York Giant fans? This is a special edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, simply because, rather than do a short updating you on the injuries, it's going to probably take me a little bit more than a minute to run through everything, to give you some thoughts and what I know about the Giants injury situation, which is as bad as I can ever remember it being. 17 guys this week appeared on the injury report. That's 32% of the 53-man roster. Oh my goodness. And, look, how this happened, we can discuss that. We could talk about the dangers of the game, how, it takes a wrong hit, how it takes a wrong step. A guy maybe gets rolled up on or whatever. But a lot of soft tissue injuries on this injury list. And before I get into the list, actually, let's talk about this real quick, because one of the big questions, I know I asked it at the start of the season. I know a couple of other people asked it. We never really got a definite answer, is what were the Giants doing to make the injury situation less of a factor? Now, obviously, you can't protect a guy from a broken bone. You can't necessarily protect them from having, somebody roll up on his ankle. But things like groins and calves and hamstrings, that's stuff that supposedly, with prevention, you can keep that from occurring. So that being said, the Giants have this sports science department. They monitor the player reps in practice. They monitor, how a guy is feeling. They meet with the doctors and the trainers and the players themselves to kind of see where they're at. And this injury situation is still going on. All right. The Giants have got to be one of the most injured teams in the last 10 years. I mean, every year it seems like the Giants are at the top, at or near the top of the most injured teams in the NFL. Something's got to change. What that something is, I don't know. But apparently, whatever they did in the offseason to improve the situation, it ain't working. And we'll go through the list in a minute. Again, some of the injuries on here, understandable. They happen in the course of a game. But let's go through the injury list here. So declared out, Daniel Jones with the neck injury, Azeez Ojulari with an ankle injury, Matt Peart, shoulder injury, John Michael Schmitz, shoulder injury, Andrew Thomas, hamstring. Now, let's just go through these real quick. Daniel Jones with the neck injury, back early in the week when Dable was talking about how Jones might, they were optimistic, based on what Jones was telling them. Folks, come on. A neck injury you don't mess around with. And I know, because I've been dealing with a pinched nerve in my neck now since May, and it's finally starting to get better. And here we are in mid-October, and my neck injury is starting to finally get better. So can you imagine if I played football? Do you think I would be cleared to play if I had a pinched nerve that, God forbid, if I took a hit the wrong way, something could happen? Probably not. Now, supposedly Daniel Jones's neck injury is not the same as the one that ended his season with 6 games to go back in 2021. But folks, you don't mess around with a neck injury. And as optimistic as I'd like to be, I don't think we're going to see Daniel Jones for a while. Hopefully we see him again this season. I don't think, we're going to see him for a while. So you've got the Daniel Jones injury. Azeez Ojulari with an ankle. I mean, this guy, I like Azeez, but he's always injured. And again, I know stuff happens during the course of a game, but my goodness, it's always something with him. And at this point, if you can't stay on the field, then go. Get somebody else who can. Seriously, I mean, enough's enough. The best ability is availability. This guy can't stay on the field. So now, guess what? Now the Giants have to probably somehow find a way to bring O'Shane Zimenez up to give them depth. All right. So, all right. As if they don't have enough to do. Let's get into the offensive line. Parrott with the shoulder. How that happened, I don't know, because if I recall correctly, Parrott wasn't very effective last week when he was pressed into action. John Michael Schmitz with the shoulder on the tush push a couple weeks ago. Andrew Thomas with the hamstring from the Dallas game. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but the Giants have been very reluctant under this regime to put guys on IR. And it was whispered that Andrew Thomas's hamstring injury was significant enough that it would be a multi-week affair. So, okay, I get it. You want to keep the guy around. You know, he's your best player. You don't want to necessarily put him on IR. But if there was any inkling that it was going to be a multi-week affair, and there was some whispers about it, why was he not put down on IR? I don't understand that. So basically, you know, a couple weeks ago, Andrew Thomas tried to practice, couldn't go, and we're right back to where we started from with him. Meanwhile, you know, he's been taking up a roster spot that maybe could have gone to somebody else. So now what? Now, if you're the Giants, you say, okay, we need the roster spot now, so let's put him on IR and we have to lose him for 4 weeks. I'm sorry, guys. This should have been done, you know, weeks ago based on the severity of that hamstring, but it wasn't. So it is what it is. Okay, now let's talk about the guys who are questionable. You've got 2 running backs, Saquon Barkley and Gary Brightwell, both dealing with ankles. I'm fairly certain one of the 2 is going to play. I don't know if it's going to be Saquon, but if both of those guys are out, now you're left with Matt Breida and Eric Gray. That ain't good. You talk about a lack of depth. That ain't good, folks. You have DJ Davidson on the list as questionable with a knee. Davidson, as you might recall, missed most of last year with a torn ACL. Wasn't even seen on the practice field on Friday during the part open to the media. So that's got to be a concern. Shane Lemieux with a groin. Shane Lemieux is another one who seems to be injured every time you turn around. Lemieux just might have to dress for this game, regardless if he's ready to go, and maybe serve as an emergency type. You know, if God forbid something happens to Ben Bredesen at center. But Lemieux dealing with a groin. Micah McFadden with an ankle. I think Micah McFadden, I believe last week was active and apparently still having problems with that ankle. Evan Neal now has an injury, an ankle injury. He wasn't spotted on the practice field by, you know, at the start of practice that was open to the media. So, hey, now the Giants have potentially 3 tackles, 3 offensive tackles that might not be able to go. And last week, I think they had, 4 guards playing and an offensive tackle on the offensive line. What a mess. What a mess. Right? And then, oh, by the way, Darren Waller is on the injury report with a groin ailment. Now, here's what I maybe lost something in the translation. I don't think I did, but I'm going to mention it for what it's worth. Back when Darren Waller landed on the injury report in week 1, Dable was asked about that, and he said something to the effect of, we had planned for this. You know, I guess if Waller needed a Veterans Day rest, they would give it to him. But hey, Waller's been able to practice every week since, not showing up on the injury report till this week. So if he was supposed to get a Veterans Day rest, because of concerns with his prior hamstring issues. Why did that go away? I mean, something got lost in the translation there. Maybe they meant that they planned for it in the event he had something happen, which, duh, of course you're going to let the guy rest or you're going to hold him out of practice if he has an injury. So I'm really not sure what Dable was getting at there. Don't know what exactly it is, but goodness gracious, this is bad. So that being said, here's the situation with the Giants. They got to make some roster moves. As I have mentioned before, this regime has been very reluctant, for whatever the reason, to put guys on IR. All right. So here's how I see it. And I kind of drew it up on my little pad here. Here's how I see it. Tommy DeVito is definitely going to have to come up from the practice squad, because there's no way the Giants go into this game against Buffalo with just Tyrod Taylor as the only quarterback. They're going to have to bring up at least 2 offensive tackles if Evan Neal cannot go. All right. Again, Thomas and Parrott have already been declared out. Those are your 3 tackles. All right. So you figure Joshua Zudu will probably get left tackle again. Although I wonder if perhaps Yadni Kajuste gets called up and he plays tackle. Now if he can play tackle for them, if he's ready to play, maybe he goes in at right tackle. And they just roll with with Joshua Zudu at left tackle. Not ideal, but, some people have said, well, what about Justin Pugh? I don't know if Justin Pugh at this point in his career is a tackle or more of a guard. I think he's more of a guard. He could play tackle, I suppose, if need be, but I don't know if that's really his best position right now. So he has a possibility to be brought up. As I mentioned with center, okay, I do think Lemieux is active, but they don't play him unless they absolutely need to. And that would only happen if something happened to Bredesen. So that's a mess there. I mentioned Zimenez coming up for Ojulari. All right. And then at running back, I don't think the Giants have any running backs on the practice squad. So hopefully, like I said, one of Barkley or Brightwell will be able to play, because otherwise that position is paper thin. And then, at defensive tackle, if Davidson can't go, you figure Jordan Riley comes up, but the Giants might just, say, okay, you know what? That's the least of our worries. We've got to take care of the offensive line. So as I see it, the Giants have 2 standard practice squad elevations that they are allowed. They need to make at least 4 moves. So they have to bring up 2 from the practice squad, which they will. And then they're going to have to put either 2 guys on IR or cut somebody. So in doing the math, the way it works is you have, when a practice squad player comes up, his salary gets bumped up to whatever the equivalent is to what corresponding to his year's experience. So in other words, if the guy's a rookie and the minimum rookie salary is, and I'm just, I don't know it off the top of my head, but let's say it's $750,000. So he gets 1/117th, 1/117th. Yep, that's right, of that salary, which is an increase for him. So the Giants, with a kind of a tight cap situation right now, which is why, by the way, I think they're going to maybe look to move some guys at the trade deadline if they can. But yeah, I think it would probably make sense to, if you can, sign the guys who are making the less money and add them to the 53, like the DeVitos, for example, the Zimenez's, and then the veteran guys, make them your standard practice squad elevations, because I think that works out cheaper for them. So what's the offensive line going to look like? Very good question, folks. I'm not sure I have an answer for you at this point. But I will say this before I get to that, to try to answer that. What they do with DeVito is going to be very telling about where Jones stands, right? So if DeVito ends up being a standard practice squad elevation, then there's probably hope that Jones is not going to be long term. If they sign DeVito to the roster, then I would say maybe there's a little bit more concern than they're letting on. Because as I mentioned, you don't mess around with neck injuries, right? One wrong move, and trust me, they are painful. All right, so offensive line. Azudu probably at left tackle. Not the best option, but they've been rolling with that option now for several weeks with Thomas out. Left guard, maybe Justin Pugh steps in there. Ben Bredesen at center. Marcus McKethan, who was on the injury report but did not receive an injury designation, he'll go in there at right guard. And right tackle, maybe that'll be Kajusti. So that would be my guess on the offensive line. Will that be what they end up rolling with? We'll have to see. But Giants team, an absolute mess. And I'll just say one last thing. And this is something also I'm going to explore on Giants Country. I had a question come in from a reader as part of my weekly mailbag that I do. And the question was very simple, and it's a fair question. How did we get this so wrong with this team, especially all the optimism that we all had coming out of the spring, coming out of training camp? How could we have been so wrong? Folks, the answer is kind of simple. This is not the team we thought we were going to see. Who knew that Andrew Thomas and Saquon Barkley would miss a quarter of the season? Right? Who knew that Evan Neal wasn't going to fully develop and take the next step? Who knew that, they were going to have some question marks on the back end of their defense? We didn't see this in training camp. So that to me is like, okay, was it just the other side wasn't as good that they masked it, or, what exactly was going on? But here we are, folks. Week 6 of the season, the Giants could potentially not win another game for a while. I don't see them winning against Buffalo. They've got Washington the following week, a team that you would think they'd be able to beat. I don't even know if they're going to beat them, because it just seems like this team is so deflated right now. These injuries are just unbelievable. And that fact that they can't figure out through their sports science department how to fix some of these soft tissue injuries that keep popping up, it's just mind-blowing. So, it's a frustrating time to be a Giant fan, to be, a member of the Giant media, to just have an interest in the team. It is very frustrating. And big changes are going to have to be coming, because the more I think about this, folks, the more I just wonder, if they're going to just have to just say, you know what, we're going to have to blow this up a little bit, because the depth is probably the number one problem on this team outside of the injuries. They do not have depth at certain positions where they need to have it. They have too much depth at positions where they don't need it, aka slot receiver. So a lot of interesting days coming up for this Giants regime. What will Joe Schoen do? Is he going to say, okay, you know what? We've been hit hard by injuries. This isn't the team that we expected. The team we expected is going to be better, so we'll just get through this year and start from scratch? Maybe. Does he say, you know what? We've done everything we can, and Daniel Jones just really isn't the answer we thought he was, so maybe we got to think about another quarterback, possibly. I don't know what the answers are, folks. It's going to be interesting to follow it. Going to be interesting to see how it unfolds. But this team, I hate to say it, is a lost cause this season. And it's very unfortunate, especially coming off of last year, when the coaching staff was able to get so much more out of so much less. But then again, it didn't really have the injury situation. Every team's got injuries. Giants got hit hard and no depth to solve it. So, all right, folks, that's my little vent session for today. I want to thank you for tuning in. Wish I had something better to share with you guys, but the Giants right now are a mess. And barring a miracle, gosh, it's going to be a long, long next couple of months until this season comes to an end. We'll talk again soon, Giant fans. Have a great weekend.